It's great to be here with this very august panel from FDA, from industry now, from the Hill, and also now from FDA. So it's a great bunch. I want to start off. There was so much focus on the national efforts on FDORA and the new legislation and how that might change the regulatory balances. But the medical device industry is global. Most everything, there's a supply chain where most everything is imported, including devices that use software. Many of the device companies are abroad. So I just wanted to first start out with Fatemeh and ask about the International Medical Device Regulatory Forum and how these efforts in the U.S. are meeting with the more global efforts.
Sure. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Actually, IMDRF stands for, just for those who might not be familiar, it stands for International Medical Device Regulators Forum. And basically back in 2012, 5 mature regulators, including US FDA, got together and they established IMDRF with the goal of accelerating global harmonization and convergence. So the role that IMDRF plays is quite critical because they create the venue that they bring the stakeholders, the regulators, not just US, but also from other regions, and also your medical device manufacturers. And it gives us the opportunity to share best practices, information, so that we could have, let's say, in the case of cybersecurity, so we could design secure devices. And then also enhance patient safety, which is really important for all of us. And at the end of the day, accelerating global access to medical devices.
Yeah, thank you. How will this affect importing of medical devices?
I would have to defer that question to somebody who deals with importing.
You probably have a better answer than I do.
So I would say, I would take a different spin on that question. And I would look at it from what does it mean in terms of getting these devices marketed across the globe? What happens when you have a venue like IMDRF and you share all these best practices and you have global convergence, you provide I would say, an efficient and a streamlined regulatory environment for manufacturers. So you reduce that regulatory burden, and as a result of that, you're able to market your devices in multiple regions. I mean, we see let's look at this pandemic, the recent pandemic, right? The pandemic taught us or reminded us that medical devices cross borders. So with that said, the more we can have regulatory convergence across the board, across the globe, the better it is, not just for us as manufacturers, but also for the patients that we serve.
Fatemeh, I think also we also are trying to, a lot of the harmonization efforts also are trying to do like single audit, reduce the regulatory burden where we actually increase the cooperation of regulatory agencies, which reduce costs for manufacturers. But of course, that takes aligning on what the requirements are. But I know you work through a number of programs that do that as well. And that maybe the last comment I want to make related to cybersecurity, as a manufacturer, what we're really happy to see is that documents like the initial principles and practices of cybersecurity that was released by IMDRF really drove regulation that's happening locally inside countries. So we don't get major deviations where we have to have a separate set of requirements for the Chinese market or the Japanese market. If you read the laws, the regulatory requirements in those countries, you literally can see the language from the IMDRF documents being essentially repeated, which I think is good for everyone. It makes sure that those markets get security, but also that it's not deviating from hopefully what the international norm should be.
Do you find FDORA is helpful towards that international effort?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, obviously, I think we would all acknowledge, and it got credit today, and they deserve it. The FDA is leading not just, industry in the US, one of the more engaged federal agencies, but that sets the bar. I know Suzanne specifically in Afton, as mentioned earlier, are helping, they I think co-chair the cybersecurity group to bring those regulators to the table. And Fedora itself, it's definitely setting the bar. I get asked a lot. There's a lot of nuance in that law, and I get asked a lot, like, what changed, right? And what I always tell my business partners is, FDA's always been able to use safety and effectiveness to exercise their authority, but now they actually have another hammer, which is basic hygiene. And if you don't have basic cybersecurity hygiene, it doesn't matter if your device is safe and effective, you can still get denied, which is a new bar. Now, I think all of us would agree those two relate together very strongly, but I think, the way I think of it is deficiencies in the past might have had to relate, they had to tie it back to why that device was unsafe. And they can now literally say, like, you don't have an SBOM denied, or deficiency, right? And I think it's an important, and valuable requirement. And I think internationally we'll see everyone follow that approach.
How do you see this as a tool that will help through the regulatory part, through 510Ks, through PMAs, but also through devices that might be exempt or under enforcement discretion?
So the last two I'm going to have to defer because I'm not an expert on that, but to tag off of Chris's point, he was actually going to touch on, I think, one of the most critical elements of this, which is we do want to be extremely clear. The passage of the passage of the Omni was not the sudden sea change of now FDA is going to start looking at cybersecurity. FDA has been looking at cybersecurity for an extremely long time.
Trust me, we see the deficiencies.
But like Chris said, in the past, the regulatory bar has always been safety and effectiveness. And that is an extremely, extremely high bar to meet when you're talking about cybersecurity. And that's not because the connection wasn't there. But as you've seen in the simulation today, as you've seen in the discussions that we've been having, the evidence to directly tie a cybersecurity vulnerability or a cybersecurity incident to a safety and effectiveness impact is not necessarily as mature as it is in other areas. So for us to be able to say, this cybersecurity vulnerability, which we have no evidence has ever been exploited, is a patient safety risk. And to be able to draw that to FDA's existing authorities, it wasn't impossible, but it was a challenge. And like Chris said, the conversation is now a little bit different, because if we can say we have reasonable assurance of cybersecurity, that is the exact language that comes from the statute. And so if there is some kind of cybersecurity risk, there will always be a risk-benefit calculation. FDA's mission is always to ensure patients have access to the treatment that they need when they need it, and that treatment is safe and effective. So there will be the risk-benefit calculation of cybersecurity risk and what we're going to do about it. But now, instead of having to draw that extremely high bar, that connection to cybersecurity vulnerability, cybersecurity incident, patient safety risk, we can point to, it is a cybersecurity risk in and of itself. Let's have the conversation about the risks that this poses, and let's get it fixed. And I think you would agree, that's a different conversation that sets the bar differently, and I think it's going to very much accelerate what we can and can't do. And I will maybe phrase it, how long the conversations take to get us from there is a risk to the risk is going to be fixed.
Can I add a concern? I just want to be a little bit candid here and bring that global harmonization aspect in. There is a bit of a concern related to diverging from global harmonization efforts. As you know, and I'm going to provide a little bit of a context, FDA developed a tool called eStar, and basically it's a dynamic tool that was developed with the goal of streamlining the market authorization process for US devices. The eStar tool incorporates the IMDRF table of content. So eStar is now globally harmonized based on IMDRF recommendation. As a matter of fact, right now, there is a joint pilot effort that's going on with Health Canada and FDA, trying to see if we could expand ESR to other jurisdictions, and if that goes well, it looks like it is, and I can tell you as a Medtronic employee, we are participating as a pilot participant. If that goes well, it could get expanded to other regions. And what it means is that it's going to accelerate the approval for devices. Going back to the concern is that there might be deviation from global harmonization efforts. And for me, I look at it also as an opportunity for manufacturers to continue staying engaged and collaborate with the regulators and trying to make sure that we stay globally harmonized. But I just wanted to put that on the table because it is one of those efforts that manufacturers with global footprint value very much, and we are a big proponent of that tool.
Having trouble with the off button, it's a real life mute button fail. No, I think we would agree. As Chris stated, FDA co-chairs the IMDRF cybersecurity working group. So we see the value in IMDRF, not just in cybersecurity, but overall. And so the global harmonization is an incredible priority for us, and we will certainly be looking to balance that with our new cybersecurity authorities and figure out how we can implement as effectively as possible.
Okay, we have a different effort going on in FDA, which is called a predetermined change control plan guidance that has to do with machine learning and artificial intelligence. So that, in a way, will loosen some of FDA reins. Do you see any vulnerabilities specifically to machine learning or artificial intelligence that could affect cybersecurity?
Absolutely. If you have a technology, you have cyber threats. And so machine learning, artificial intelligence, quantum computing, who one of our staffers is very passionate about and is working to educate the team on. These are all things that can impact medical device cybersecurity. And this is one of the reasons that FDA stood up the Digital Health Center of Excellence and has a digital health team that we work extremely closely with on the cybersecurity side, is to balance these kinds of things, because there's already evidence of cybersecurity threats to artificial intelligence systems and machine learning. And as these types of capabilities are integrated into medical systems and health systems, they need to have the cyber protections in place that we would expect and now are part of the statutory requirements.
I'd like to jump in a little bit because you used, I can't remember the exact language you used.
Predetermined change.
Well, no, the loosening the reins. I want to emphasize that. So we were a big proponent in advocating for that predetermined change control plan. In fact, we've been trying to advocate that it should be used beyond AI. AI makes total sense because you need to be able to retrain algorithms. And honestly, we're getting to the point where software change is going to happen faster than probably the regulatory process can move. And the whole idea that, what I want to emphasize, that it's called predetermined change control plan because the manufacturer essentially has to detail out exactly what scope of change they're allowed to make, how they're going to verify that change, how they make sure the intended use didn't change. But it allows us, for instance, to maybe get 5% better at detecting a polyp in your colon, and we can roll that change out to market. I mean, that's how we want to operate. I think this is a very positive thing, but it is in control, and FDA, if we want to adjust that, we have to go back and get it reapproved. Obviously, there's oversight in that process, so I just want to, I think it's actually one of those innovative tools that we now have that can actually also benefit us in the cybersecurity space, because as you can imagine, we're having to make changes just to maintain this device. And I know the post-market guidance says that we're allowed to do certain things, but the reality is sometimes there's a lot of change happening. That's not always, if we're using iOS and they change the way they do notifications, we need to be able to really rapidly test and roll that change out. And adding a real-time review, even if it took 4 weeks, that's 4 weeks that our apps may be failing because the latest version of iOS just rolled out, and that's not. We got to move faster than that. So, but I think it's actually a good example of a tool that we'll be able to leverage both for AI and hopefully more broadly.
Thank you So you see the updating and the AI within these predetermined change control plans as a way of updating software very quickly to respond to cybersecurity
Yeah,
threats.
cybersecurity, obviously, just retraining on new data. If you start seeing that I mean, my best example in AI right now is, it's fascinating. I'll probably share too much here. But it's fascinating to watch how Tesla operates, and there's that regulatory framework is really not around them, but to watch them keep training that vehicle to get safer and safer, and then sometimes less safe because they regress something. It's fascinating to watch that, and it enables them to adapt faster to the data that's coming in. And if you can imagine, they push updates out at least monthly, sometimes faster, especially when they make a major change. It really enables them to rapidly respond, and but it has to be safe. It goes through a lot of testing. The regulatory framework is not there, but let's face it, if they mess up, they're going to face quite a bit of liability concerns, and already have been sued for things, right? So they clearly have a motivation to make sure it's working.
Yeah, one last question about that. I think the concern is there a new pathway for cyber threats, not just in the software, but in the training that's used to teach that software, and how will that be assured?
Yeah, there's some good work. Probably the best work I've seen is out of I think it's called Bear. I'm doing this, it's been like a year since I read it, the Bearville Institute, Gary McGraw's work, trying to identify what could be different. There's been a lot of work happening on how to trick AI systems to think there's a stop sign there when it's not, and all that fun stuff. It's definitely something we need to think about, trusting input that you're getting, and trusting AI to make decisions and how they can possibly trick it, because it's in many cases not, even humans make mistakes, right? And so it's a real issue we'll have to work on. I think in a lot of cases with medical devices, just to reassure everyone, I don't expect it's gonna be learning itself in the field. It's gonna be a lot of training in the background, massive data sets, and there's part of what we're working through is rules on training data sets having be different from verification data sets and validation data sets, and then we'll do clinical trials to validate that it's working. There's a lot of rigor that'll be around it. So I think, and we do think about some of those threats. Just as an example, I've been asked questions about having surgical devices, like video from one device feed another one, and then we run an AI algorithm on it. And there are definitely times when I'm having to point out things of not necessarily being able to trust that video coming, and especially if they're doing some critical safety thing off of it. There's AI systems now that can actually look for surgical tools to make sure you don't close and left something behind, right? And that's good. That should drive safety. But if you can imagine if there is some type of attack happening against that, someone puts something on the video feed that is distorting it and it can't reliably see it. It could be an issue, yes.
It's good that you're looking into that in that much detail. Another question, more general, policy related. We heard the term hygiene being used for cybersecurity, and I think that's a good analogy of hygiene. And when I think back to when I was at FDA, we had general controls that applied to all devices, whether they were exempt, class 1, or any devices. And some of the general controls had to do with basically dirt and cleanliness, and that's under the general control of adulteration, which applies to pretty much every device. Any thought about since most devices now, I think, probably have some sort of software either embedded or connecting, of thinking of that as a general control, or is this so far off that it doesn't make sense?
So again, I work in the wrong part of FDA for this, but what I can say is with the new authorities, and again, emphasizing that the new authorities were not the beginning of FDA's cybersecurity journey here. The cybersecurity reviews happen if there is a reason to believe that cyber threats can affect that device. So whether it's general controls, whether or not it's special controls, we have put into place review expectations, review training, and so on, that cyber threats are looked for and examined, and that the cybersecurity controls that need to be in place to manage those threats are also present. And if those cybersecurity controls are not present, whatever they're being categorized as, then we will work with the manufacturer to get those addressed, because then now you would not have reasonable assurance of cybersecurity. Previously, you may have had an impact to safety and effectiveness.
And I think I'm familiar with, I've worked years ago on many Medtronic devices in FDA, especially the neural. A lot of changes go on in PMA supplements, and a lot of them are software updates. So I think one of the worries about legacy devices may not be so much because many of the Class 3 PMA devices already go through lots of updates. And then the 510K, they can go through a special 510K for these kinds of updates.
Yes, I've advised all our businesses that if they're making a change to the device, the new requirements apply. So it will, and already is, I can attest to that, forcing behavior change good in a positive way. It doesn't address all the legacy issue. We definitely have a lot more work to do. We're definitely committed to doing that. It's a complicated problem. But I definitely think even though it's just for new submissions, I think your point is really important, and I do emphasize this, that changes to existing devices, the new requirements apply, and we've made that 100% clear to all our businesses. And so you will see existing devices improving just because we're coming back to change a part out or something like that. Yes.
So I do want to walk us back just a little bit on the optimism on legacy devices and legacy technologies. Because, well, that is absolutely true, and appreciate the forward-leaning attitude and approach. I think we have an unbelievably massive issue when it comes to unsupported, outdated, unprotectable, unsecurable technologies in the healthcare system. And we have not figured out how to address that issue. Part of it is financial, and I think this has been discussed likely by Senator Warner's staff and by others who've mentioned this. The challenges for healthcare delivery organizations and healthcare delivery professionals to make the decisions between, do I staff my hospital? Do I buy a critical new technology that, by the way, maybe may not be up to what we would hope the standards of cybersecurity would be, but if I don't have that piece of technology, I can't offer this piece of critical care? Do I decommission a piece of technology that is the only technology that allows me to provide a critical type of care, perhaps the only type of critical care in a given region? All of these things have to be balanced against legacy technology issued and needing to replace and refresh technology so that we don't have these problems. The other thing that I would say, and Chris, I'd be interested in your thoughts on this, we have an extreme tech debt problem. You do not throw away the code base. You do not throw away the design. You do not throw away years and years, if not decades, of research and development work when you make a new device. So the chances are that if your legacy device had unprotectable, unsecurable, unfixed vulnerabilities, your new device is going to have unsecured, unprotectable, unfixable vulnerabilities. And while our new authorities are going to be able to help us address that to an extent, it's not a panacea. And we also, of course, at FDA, and I mentioned this before, and is also something we think is very critical, we need to be cognizant of not creating patient access issues. So while we are dealing with legacy and trying to reduce the amount of cybersecurity risks that we have in the healthcare sector, we need to do so in a way that makes sure that patients can still get the care that they need when they need it. And I don't think we're quite there yet in understanding how we're going to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. There's a lot of major devices are, we don't re-engineer things from scratch. We can make improvements, and we do. I mean, if you go back to in history, popular events at Black Hat and such, right? We used to think that hey, we have a custom wireless protocol. We don't need to. No one can ever find this, right? It turns out if you replay it, and of course, software-defined radios got popular and things like that. Obviously, those are the types of changes we can add on. They're not trivial, because a lot of, like, if we have a pacemaker that's implanted, it has a 10-year life, and we need to have it work. Crypto is not a cheap power, task, right? So there are definitely decisions that we have to make through. We're trying to use components and not necessarily build our own components. And they have to be low power. Like, there are a lot of decisions that have to be made in that. But there's a lot of progress happening too. It's not all bad. But it is definitely, as a manufacturer, we're prioritizing the most serious things and making sure those are getting addressed. And the reality is it's the risk management process. We're making sure the things that can hurt someone are getting addressed. And then over time, we're cycling that. I think maybe one of the things that's really important that we're trying to shift the industry into a little better is medical devices have been very hardware-based. Hardware life cycles are really long. Software life cycles are really short. And, we, admittedly, as part of the legacy document, can make bad decisions about, let's use a commercial operating system to run our hardware, even though we know that by the time we actually get it to market, that system is not going to be supported anymore. Like, there's definitely some decisions that we're trying to work ourselves out of like that. They're not trivial. I can tell you we're tackling them, but it is not an easy problem to solve. But we are leaning in and working on it. So it's improving. The other thing I want to mention on the legacy problem that's just how complicated it is. I think one of the most surprising things I learned, we have like an advisory board where we have hospital CISOs and physicians on it. And I was asking the question about, life cycle of the devices. And the thing that I was told that really opened my eyes was, a lot of the big hospitals, they buy the brand new stuff. It improves, they run so much through it that they can pay for it. They use it for its planned life cycle, great. What do they do with that device when they've hit end of life? They sell it to another hospital. And that's actually part of the cost model. So a downstream hospital actually buys a device that's basically they're not buying it from the manufacturer, they're buying it from another healthcare organization. And so we have just this built-in, the way cost is managed across the ecosystem that is, it's a complicated problem. It's going to take us some time to unravel. The other thing I would say about that, to the point on access, is that rural hospital may not have had an MRI machine unless they were buying it second, used. So they may be getting an improved service. So this is still a net benefit, but we still need to manage all those risks, and it's not an easy. There aren't real easy problems or solutions you can just apply across the board and it's going to magically fix it. We're going to be wrestling with this.
Yeah, that's a good one. One last question before I open it up, Jessica. What do you see as a solution to the legacy problem, especially when you have reprocessed devices? Ideally, beyond I know the legislation's for future devices.
So funny you asked me this. Chris did not suffer through the 3 years of the legacy technology.
I watched it, but I delegated that one.
We had a legacy technology working group underneath the Health Sector Coordinating Council that started when I arrived at FDA and finished 2 months ago, and I have been at FDA for 3 years. So solutions, I don't know about solutions. One, and I'm not just saying this to be cute, that if you were interested in this topic, the Health Industry Cybersecurity Managing Legacy Technology Security resource that we put out it sounds crazy, but it's very readable and you don't have to read the whole thing to get the benefit. It's 115 pages of discussion on this issue. And it breaks it down into governance, communications, risk management, future proofing. It covers all of these areas. It talks about all of these things. And The solutions, such as they exist, are what we propose in there. And to Chris's point, some of it is on how do we design devices better. So how do we choose, one of the things that I'm most proud of in that document is how do we choose software vendors? When medical device manufacturers are debating what software vendors to incorporate into their product, what ones should they be choosing? What are their criteria? We came up with criteria. In the circumstance, we have, like he was saying, hospitals have to make really hard decisions. Am I going to continue using this technology after it is no longer supported because I need to? How do I do that as safely, as effectively as possible? We have an entire framework that we put together for that. And so I think it's going to be taking those recommendations, those considerations that honestly represent the cream of the crop, best thinking of the industry and the government partners who were part of that group so far, to at least how we make progress. Not how we solve it, but how we make progress in the right direction.
That's wonderful. Okay, I think we'll open up the floor for questions. Oh, by the way, that doc is called HICMALTS.
HICMALTS.
Chris told me, I didn't know. HICMALTS. Yes. So if you Google that.
To just take a little bit of pressure off the FDA, they're part of a village of the pantheon of federal government and public-private partnerships. And in addition to, the FDA saying what's safe, I can buy a used car and I can sell that used car and sell it and sell it and sell it. But we have different roads, just vehicle inspections to get on the highway. So in the fuller pantheon, without doing a lecture right now by accident, part of the national cybersecurity strategy was just explained to us. But Pillar 3 also says, hey, we may introduce liability for negligent behavior on final goods assemblers through statute, through the courts or whatnot. And that's not gonna be an FDA thing. That could be different statute, different corrective action, pretty boldly and cleanly articulated in Pillar 3 of the National Cybersecurity Strategy. Number 2, Cyber AccuView is the top 20 underwriters of cybersecurity insurance in the world. And they have ratified our CISA.gov/bad practices, which are 3 behaviors they consider to be extremely risky and dangerous, which includes the use of unsupported end-of-life operating systems in service of critical infrastructure. So this could be whether or not you get insurance and how much more insurance costs. And similarly, Moody's and underwriter or credit rating agencies are starting to factor these things in. So the enforcement of this could be CMS, could be liability, could be insurance or the inability to get it. So yes, there are aftermarkets, and where these devices become too unsafe for the public health, not just the individual private decision, there could be other mechanisms. So I feel bad every time I see people put everything at the FDA's feet. They're almost punished for their success, but there's a pantheon of controls, both in government and in financial incentives.
Naomi Schwartz, I used to be at FDA, I'm at MedCrick now. I wanted to comment on your comment about loosening the reins for predetermined change control plans. While I was at FDA, we didn't believe we were loosening the reins when we did that.
The diabetes branch actually decided that it was safer for patients if their mobile apps for CGM or insulin pumps could be updated more rapidly than we could review it, because we knew that a mobile app change would be affected by iOS changes, and iOS does not tell you all the things they do when they make a change. And we actually saw some post-market incidents caused by that. The branch decided that even though predetermined change control is not an official thing, that it made sense to talk through the processes and the validation approach for each type of change, and have a different approach for ones that just needed to happen without a review cycle and could be reportable after the fact, rather than having some formalized structure and having to review everything. There's no way FDA can review all the changes in mobile apps for home use devices. They can't. It's not possible, and they shouldn't. And manufacturers need to keep up with that. And patients don't want to get a message on their app that says, by the way, this might not work for the next month while we're validating this. That's not possible. So predetermined change control plan is already happening, has been for years, and whether it's formalized in some way or not, it's now in the language. I do believe that showed up in the appropriations bill. So, it's there for a reason. It's because it works. and it's important. And it's not loosening the reins, it's just changing the way we're talking about it. And it's really helpful for cybersecurity, but it's also just really helpful for good software practice.
That's a great thing when it's done right, which hopefully it would be, given all the exempted and enforcement discretion devices. And incidents with AI, in particular with introducing bias through AI, I think that as long as those that control plan is very tightly regulated, I think that would work and would help promote the process. I haven't seen special 510Ks taking that long, but this could be a solution. But anyway, we'll see how it goes. There's guidance now, and there's a period of public comment, and I'm certainly going to be making some comments on that.
Yep, Justin Heil with Baxter Healthcare. You mentioned, harmonization, right, globally, and just want to get your thoughts on, I think you were alluding to the MDSAP, right, the Medical Device Single Audit Program. What have you seen for the level of review and consistency between notified bodies, and the FDA with respect to cybersecurity? So that's kind of two questions, right? You have something CE marked in Europe and say, let's bring it to the US. And what is that? What do you experience in that area?
I will start by answering. I think it's improving, but just like manufacturers are learning, so are the regulatory bodies. And so, we get varied experiences across different branches, but FDA has some great processes that we leverage to make sure we're getting feedback. People like Matt Hazlett are running the, what's the program?
Cybersecurity company?
Focal point program, yeah. So to try to drive that consistency. I will tell you, we're a big enough company that we see very quickly when deficiency templates get updated, because all of a sudden I start seeing new language showing up in different businesses, and I'm like, okay. There's work to do that. I will tell you, our experience with notified bodies is that they do, I'm sure they're paying attention to each other, but we do have a different experience there. They are checking things, but it's we get much different questions from notified bodies than we do from FDA reviews. And as far as MDSAP, I'll let you comment. They haven't necessarily fully integrated a lot of security into that, but that's all coming. We are getting inspections. This all takes time to roll out and train. As we know, cybersecurity is not an easy topic. We definitely had cybersecurity findings in inspections, in audits. We've had warning letters that talk about it. Not that I'm proud of that, but it's happening not through like they're doing cybersecurity. It's risk management that happened to be a cybersecurity element or something like that. So it is coming into scope, and I expect that will continue to increase. So not only will it be reviews, but it'll be inspections and everything that we're starting to experience.
And I would just piggyback on that. I would say that on the post-market side with MDSAP, we are in a much better place than comparing that to the pre-market side. As a matter of fact, MDSAP is one of the success stories when it comes to talking about globally convergent regulatory requirements or talking about a reliance model. That's a success story that we always leverage. But I think as medical device manufacturers, we need to continue actively engaging in different forums and push our regulators to align their regulatory requirements, and that way they would create a streamlined regulatory environment for us, and we could accelerate access to medical devices globally. That's why I brought up the concern with eStar, right? Because eStar is gonna get us to single dossier, and from seeing single dossier, I see single dossier as the first step to get us to single review. And it would be, and I know my FDA folks are sitting in the audience, I mean, it would be ideal if we could go to a place, we would be in a place a day that you as a manufacturer just go to one entity, to one regulator, and their decision is accepted by other regulators across the board. We are seeing already Switzerland moving in that direction with trying to recognize US FDA's decisions. We are seeing it in UK, for example. They actually highlighted US FDA and also Japan. But again, I think part of it also falls on us as medical device manufacturers with global footprints to continue encouraging that collaboration and also continue participating in forums like IMDRF working group, where the working group is open to industry participation. And we saw the documents, the legacy document from IMDRF and the SBOM document from IMDRF came out. I see Afton in the audience. Shout out to FDA folks again. That came out, 2 weeks ago, a week ago. But that is, again, a venue that encourages harmonizing and then coming to global conversion regulatory requirement.
One thing that we're really trying to do as an industry too is try to drive, so we've gotten past the point of do you need security? We're way past that. We've even gotten past the point of do you need to do penetration tests on your device? That ship sailed a long time ago, which is great. Now we're getting into the detail, and the detail can be painful. What does a good pen test look like? What does it have to include? What does it have to be scoped like? How much time do you have to give the pen tester to do a good test? Judging that type of detail is kind of the nuance that we're in and wrestling with right now, and that's where we experience inconsistency. And to be honest with you, you could have a room full of experts and they wouldn't agree right now on the right answer. So we're trying to build work products that drive consistency and language that will help with this problem internationally as well.